that corner.
Mark Rogers TV bringing you as much instant analysis as we can possibly get to, and couldn't miss this one. One of the great traditional rivalries in all of college football. Stanford holding off Cal 17-14. We bring in Don King from Last Word on College Football to give us the Stanford angle. So, Don, you made it through. You slogged on through, and without your best player for much of the second half, and still got it done.
Absolutely. You know, and Love, let's not misunderstand. Love was critical. He did break off another long touchdown run, went 57, you know, before he got that ankle landed on again late in the third quarter, early in the fourth. Went 57 to the house, finished over 100 yards again. So, you know, on you know, a ridiculously small number of carries. I think it was 14 carries for the game, 101 yards, you know, and the kid has grit and heart and toughness in ample supply. I got to believe that all the scouts that have been checking him out are admiring his ability to remain effective despite being hampered by this thing for the last, you know, 5-6 weeks now. So as a fan of Stanford, as an alum, this is kind of what the current Stanford playbook looks like when it's executed well. There was nothing terribly exhilarating about the game. Costello played well, threw a nice touchdown pass after moving up in the pocket, showed good poise, seemed to get into the right play again and again and again all night long. The defense was stout, particularly deep in its own end. You know, and it should be noted that this Cal team is much better under Wilcox than the last several years worth of Cal teams.
They really are. They certainly have their particular letdowns. So they'll play 2 or 3 really good games, not necessarily win the games, but they'll play some quality competition and show the immense improvement, especially on the defensive side. Then they'll have one of those big letdowns where they look like the Cal of the last few years. But yeah, they have certainly had their bright spots. The one that really sticks out, the aberration, of course, the 34-point drubbing of Washington State. But you mentioned Bryce Love and his injury status and how it compromises him. And I saw a handful of carries out of his 14, I believe, in the game. And but I've seen quite a bit of Stanford just in the last few weeks. And it is apparent that he isn't 100% or anything close to 100%. And certain ways in which he's able to manage it doesn't show for a handful of carries. And then it's apparent when you get used to the burst and the cut and the go that you're used to seeing that he's not right.
That's right. Yeah, there's no two ways about it. He, you know, apparently they estimated that he was at 90% going into this game. I think that was optimistic. I don't think he was at 90% even early in the game. He apparently tweaked it fairly early, but like he does, he just kept on coming back in. And like he does when he got the opening that he's become accustomed to, he took advantage of it and he took it to the house. Even on one good leg, they still couldn't catch him, you know, from almost 60 yards out. So he's really having a remarkable season. You got to be encouraged by the play of KJ Costello down the stretch. You know, last week against Washington and tonight he put together 2 really, really good games. You know, the kid's got a fantastic arm. He's accurate. He's poised. He's clearly got a bit of swagger to him, and he shows the ability to throw the ball from different arm angles when necessary. He got a great pass off to the fullback to keep a drive alive earlier in the game. And you know, if you're gonna play a ball control kind of game, you need a quarterback who can execute like that and get into the right play and not make the big mistake. And he managed to do all of that for 2 weeks in a row now.
So, of course, your defense has quite a task coming up next week with Notre Dame coming to town. They had a bit of an aberration, and Miami fans don't jump on me. I'm not saying that you're not a better football team. I am saying that performance on both sides was an aberration, and they're very close most of the time and would be if they played 10 times, but they don't. Okay, Notre Dame has been a rushing team all year. Stanford in the front 7, of course. Your expectations of those two immovable forces, resistible objects, all that sort of business colliding next week?
Yeah, I got to tell you, Lance Anderson's going to have to go into the lab a little bit. Cal ran really well today. So their quarterback was quite efficient, in the short passing game. But their running game, did some damage, particularly between the 20s. And that's going to have to be shored up because, Josh Adams will absolutely light Stanford up if they're not better right at the point of attack than they were earlier this evening. Notre Dame struggled in its own right this evening against a good Navy team, but managed to get that done as well. Should be a real good and entertaining game next week. And I'm going to have to check the start times. I don't know if Stanford's going to know whether or not they're going to play the following week in the Pac-12 championship game or not by the time they start. I don't know the start time of the Apple Cup. But at this point, all of Nerd Nation are very, very big Chris Peterson and Washington Huskies fans.
Absolutely. So Washington State, of course, with a win over Stanford, holds the tiebreaker there, while Stanford defeated Washington just a couple weeks ago, or was that just last week on a Friday night?
Last week. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
8 days ago.
So Stanford wins this one, another huge one.
On UW. Yeah, and assuming UW beats Utah this evening, it's still the three could potentially tie, or I guess they couldn't. One of those teams is going to have 3 losses at the end of the Apple Cup. So there's going to be a tie at the top between 2 out of the 3. And if it's Washington, Stanford goes to take on SC, and if it's Wazoo, they go.
So right now we've got Washington with a 13-10 lead, closing in on the halftime there.
Yep.
And UCLA and Cal will play a pretty important game for those two programs next week, especially for Cal and the improvement that we alluded to at the outset, looking to gain its 6th win. UCLA most likely going down to USC tonight. There's just a few minutes left to play, and both teams looking for bowl eligibility. May save Jim Mora a job, and for Justin Wilcox and Cal, just another step in their improvement, trying to get in those extra practices, show themselves on a big stage on a postseason play against another Power 5 team. So a good opportunity for Cal again to get more reps and to show itself to have taken another step.
Yeah, I got to say, I think it's bigger for Cal. I think they're on the right path with Wilcox. The improvement is marked and dramatic, and it was instantaneous. Going all the way across the country to Chapel Hill and getting a win on the road in week 1 was really pretty impressive. There's none of the Cal teams of recent vintage could have done that. Guerrero is stepping down as AD at UCLA. Got to believe that they're going to move on from Mora almost no matter what. So I think the UCLA program is probably going to be jolted a bit. Rosen, I'm confident, is going to enter the draft. They're going to have a bit of a struggle anyway, and I think there's some big transitions coming down in Westwood. But for Cal, they're definitely going to want to keep the momentum. They'd love to get a bowl. They'd love to get those extra practices. That young quarterback they've got looked great, has looked great all season. He's got a ton of talent, not the strongest arm, but he's very accurate and very poised. And they're going to want to give him as much work as they possibly can. I think bowl eligibility would be a huge deal for Cal if they can pull that off next weekend.
All right, Stanford gets by Cal in the big game, 17-14. It sets up Stanford at 8-3 with a matchup against Notre Dame, which doesn't necessarily prove to be decisive in anything besides college football playoff rankings. Not a championship, but the rankings and, of course, bowl placement for both programs as the Cardinal look to finish off at 9-3. And, of course, for Cal, they're looking for bowl eligibility coming up next week, taking on UCLA. They are now 5-6. Don King from Last Word on College Football, always doing a fine job for us, breaking down Stanford and the Pac-12. Don, you have yourself a good night. Rest easy for another 365 days.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Take care.